Hello, and welcome back to Sleeping Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales whispered through the shadows of Sleeping Noir, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world. Story 1. It's not really like me to talk about myself this openly, but my family keeps telling me I can't stay closed off forever. They say the more I keep things inside, the worse it gets. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just tired of carrying it alone. Either way, I keep coming back to one memory, over and over, no matter how many doctors I see or how many pills I'm told will help. No matter what medicine I'm on, no matter how many times someone tells me it was a dream or stress or my brain playing tricks, that memory stays. It doesn't fade the way other things fade. It sits there clear enough to cut me. It was 1995 in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I was a kid, visiting with my mom for the summer like we always did. I still remember the feeling of being there, like stepping into a different kind of life. The air was heavier and sweeter than anything in the States. Everything smelled alive. There were tropical plants everywhere, green in a way that didn't look real. The houses were painted bright colors, and the streets were crowded with people who moved like they had somewhere to be but weren't stressed about it. Motorbikes passed by constantly, close enough to make you step back, and nobody acted like it was unusual. It was loud and warm and full, like the whole city was breathing. Back then, the days had their own rhythm. The electricity would go out during the day sometimes, or it just wouldn't be on, like that was normal. When it happened, nobody panicked. No one complained the way people do in the States. You just adjusted. You sat outside. You talked. You cooked. You waited for evening. I spent a lot of those afternoons watching the women in my family prepare food. Grandma, my mom, and a couple of my aunties would be in the kitchen gossiping while they cooked, moving around each other like it was a dance they'd done 1,000 times. They'd make dairy John and legume for dinner, and the smells would fill the whole house. The way they talked felt like music more than language. Everyone laughing, everyone kissing their teeth, everyone doing that sharp little cough laugh that means you just heard something you shouldn't have. I didn't understand most of what they were saying. I knew some words, caught a few phrases here and there, but it all moved too fast for me. Sometimes I would try to focus, try to follow, and I'd still get lost. Even when the words didn't reach me, the emotions did. I could always tell when they were teasing, when they were mad, when they were pretending to be shocked and weren't shocked at all. And every time one of them leaned forward to say something in a lower voice, I'd see their necklaces swing. That same gold cross on each of them, catching light as they moved. It felt like the cross was part of the conversation, like it was always there, always reminding you what kind of family this was. I knew I was Catholic because that's what my mother said we were. It wasn't something I chose, it was something you inherited, like a last name. We went to church, we prayed, we wore crosses. I never really understood why it mattered so much, but I knew the rules. I knew how serious my mom got about it. In our family, faith wasn't a private thing. It was a structure. It was identity. My aunt, though, didn't fit into that structure. She was always the black sheep. Not because she was rude or cruel, but because people whispered about her ways. The adults would talk about her like she was a storm you could see coming. They didn't fully turn their backs on her either. They said she had magic in her hands, and they meant it like it was both a gift and a problem. I didn't even know what voodoo really was at that age. I'd heard the word in movies and on TV in the States, where it was always shown as dolls and curses and scary drums. But Haiti wasn't a movie, and my aunt wasn't a cartoon villain. She was real. She smelled like perfume and soap. She laughed loud. She looked people in the eye longer than they expected. She touched your shoulder when she spoke, like she was making sure you were listening. One night, she pulled me aside and told me about her hands. She said she was psychic. I know how that sounds. Even now, writing it, I can already hear someone making a joke about it. But I believed her then. I still do. When she spoke, she didn't sound like she was trying to convince you. She sounded like she was stating a fact, like saying, "The sky is blue." She told me she could see pieces of people's lives through the palms of their hands, like something in their skin carried a story, like touching someone was enough to feel the shape of where they'd been and where they were going. She called it magnetic, like invisible waves that pulled information out. My parents hated when she talked like that around me. They didn't like her showing off. They didn't like her putting ideas in my head. They didn't like anything that made me look at our faith differently. But my aunt didn't seem scared of their disapproval. She had this calm stubbornness to her, like she'd already accepted she would never be fully accepted. She used to say, "We are special. It's in our blood." My mom didn't play about that. No matter how late we stayed up, no matter how hot the day was, no matter what plans anyone had, we went. We dressed properly, we went inside the church, we listened, we prayed. We stood and sat and knelt when everyone else did, because that's what you do. But after church, when we were back at home, I'd find my aunt again and ask her the same question. How would I know if I have it? And she'd always answer the same way. You're gonna know. She didn't say it like a warning. She said it like something inevitable, like a season changing, like it wasn't a matter of if, only when. For a long time, I treated it like a story, something mysterious to think about when I was bored. Then things started happening to me, and I stopped treating it like a story. I'm sorry if I keep saying that night. I know it sounds like I'm talking in circles, but time is weird in my head when I think about it. If you asked me to place every detail in the right order, I don't know if I could. Some memories feel like they happened in one long evening, and other memories feel like they're stitched together from different days. What I do know is that it started with being tired in a way I couldn't explain. Not normal tired, not I stayed up too late tired. I mean heavy, constant drowsiness that felt like it was pressing down on me even after a full night's sleep. I'd wake up and still feel like my body wanted to sink back into the mattress. Sometimes I would be sitting in a chair and my head would drop without warning, like someone had turned off the power. Then I started seeing things, not in the way people joke about shadows in the corner of your eye. I mean, I would be in my bed, awake, and I would see things in the room that didn't belong there. And the worst part was, I couldn't turn away. My body would lock up. My eyes would stay fixed. My brain would be screaming at me to move, to look anywhere else, to blink it away, and nothing would happen. Those were the worst moments, because it felt like being trapped inside myself while something else had access to the world around me. After it started happening more often, I got diagnosed with narcolepsy. The doctors explained it in a calm, clinical way. They asked about sleep patterns. They asked about stress. They asked about school. They asked if anyone in my family had similar issues. They gave it a name, and then they gave me a plan. My family clung to that diagnosis like it was a rope. A medical explanation felt safer than anything spiritual. It felt cleaner. It felt like something you could manage with appointments and medication and effort. But even then, deep down, I didn't feel like anything was wrong with me in the way they meant. I didn't feel sick. I felt off. like my sleep was being pulled apart and mixed with waking life, like the wall between them had thinned without my permission. And I know people will say that's exactly what narcolepsy can do. I've read enough to understand that. I'm not denying science. I'm not trying to turn this into a supernatural story for attention. I'm telling you how it felt. I was also under pressure. I had classes. I stayed up late. I was trying to keep up, trying to be normal, trying to act like nothing strange was happening. There were times I genuinely couldn't tell what was real right away, but I told myself that was fine. Everyone gets confused when they're exhausted. Everyone's mind plays tricks when they're sleep deprived. I kept pushing through it because that's what you do when you want to survive school and family expectations at the same time. My aunt didn't judge me for any of it. That was another reason I liked being around her. Sometimes I spent the night at her place. My mother always made sure I wore my cross when I went, like it was a seatbelt, like it would protect me even if my aunt's ways invited something in. My aunt had a way of looking at me that I still can't fully describe. It wasn't the way adults look at kids when they're amused or annoyed. It felt like she was looking through me or behind me, like she was watching something I couldn't see yet. It didn't feel threatening. It felt patient, like she was waiting for me to catch up to something she already knew. One evening, I remember sitting near her, trying to act normal, trying to act awake. She studied my face and said, "You're tired." I told her I wasn't. I don't know why I lied. Maybe I didn't want it to be real. Maybe I didn't want her to look at me like that. Maybe I didn't want her to be right. She hummed low, like she was agreeing with someone I couldn't hear. Not loud enough to be a conversation, but enough to make my skin tighten. Then she said something I still don't understand even now. "Your dreams are waking up before you do." The moment she said it, the air in the room felt different. Not colder, not hotter, just heavier, like the space had filled with something invisible. That's when I saw it. I don't even like writing "it" because it makes it sound simple, like a single object you can point to. It wasn't simple. It was a shape that didn't hold still long enough for my mind to label it. It passed behind my aunt's shoulder, just far enough to be in the background, and yet it felt closer to me than anything else in the room. My heart started pounding so loudly I couldn't hear anything over it. The sound of blood in my ears made everything feel distant. My aunt didn't turn around. She didn't react like something had moved behind her. That scared me more than if she had screamed. The shadow leaned in, and for a moment I had this awful feeling that it recognized me. Not like it had seen my face before, but like it knew me in a deeper way. Like it had been waiting for me to notice it. Like it had known my name before I learned how to say it. Then something changed in me, and I still can't explain how. I didn't remember moving. I didn't remember getting out of bed. I didn't remember raising my hands or doing anything at all. But I looked down and saw a warm trickle running down my wrists. Blood. Not a lot at first, just enough to shine under the light, but it kept coming. And the sight of it snapped something inside my head, because the fear became real in a way it hadn't been a second earlier. It wasn't just seeing a shadow. It was physical. It was proof that something had happened through me, not by me. That was the worst part. That feeling of violation, like my body had done something while I wasn't fully inside it. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what had happened in the space between one moment and the next. I only remembered what my aunt always said, and the words didn't comfort me the way they used to. It's in our blood. I wasn't tired until she said it, and once she named it, it felt like the tiredness had teeth. After that, my family treated me like something fragile. They paid for a therapist. They started watching me more closely. They started speaking to me gently, as if the wrong word might push me over an edge. Someone mentioned the idea of religious psychosis, like faith and fear had mixed inside me and created something unhealthy. They asked me if I really believed my aunt was a psychic. They asked me in that careful way people ask questions when they already have an answer they want you to give. The safe answer, the medical answer, the answer that fits into a file and can be handled. I always hesitated because I knew what they wanted and I knew what I believed. Yeah, I still believe it. Not because I want to, not because it makes me feel special. Not because I'm chasing some dramatic story. I believe it because that night didn't feel like imagination. It didn't feel like a metaphor. It felt like a door cracked open and something on the other side noticed me. And the hardest part is that I can't even tell you what I'm supposed to do with that. I can't go back and choose not to follow it. I can't go back and stay away from the docks, or stay in church, or keep my cross tighter around my neck. I can't go back and be the kid who thought my aunt's words were just strange and interesting. All I can do is remember. And every time I remember her looking at me like she could already see the shape of my future, I hear her voice again, calm and certain. You're gonna know. Story 2. There's a building at the edge of my university's campus that nobody will admit exists. I spend months trying to figure out why. I still don't have a clean answer. I go to our university, a mid-sized state school in New Jersey. I'm still a student there. If you also go there and you already know what I'm talking about, then you understand why I'm not using my real name or the school's full name. Before I get into it, I need to be honest about something. I don't have hard proof for most of what I'm about to say. I don't have photos that would convince a skeptic. I don't have official paperwork that spells everything out. What I do have is a real building that you can physically walk up to, a strange kind of silence around it that feels deliberate, and a bunch of separate stories I've heard from people who don't know each other and don't have any reason to coordinate what they're saying. Believe me or don't, I'm not writing this to win an argument. I'm writing it because pretending it isn't there feels worse than admitting it is. This is about the Triad Apartments, and the fact that you've probably never heard that name, even if you've been a student here for years, is exactly the point. I've been at this university for almost 3 years. I did the official campus tour. I sat through orientation. I lived in the dorms. I've dealt with housing, RAs, maintenance, the whole system. I've opened the housing portal more times than I can count. Not once in any of that time did I see or hear the name Triad Apartments. Not on the housing website, not on the printed campus map they hand new students, not on the big map boards around campus, not in Civets Hall where the housing office is, not in any email, not in any welcome to campus packet, nowhere. The only reason I heard about it at all was because someone mentioned it by accident. It was my junior year. Someone on my floor said the name quietly, like it was a joke that wasn't really a joke. Then they immediately changed the subject. When I asked what they meant, they got uncomfortable in a way that didn't match how casual the conversation had been 5 seconds earlier. They shrugged and said something like, "It's just a thing people say. I don't actually know anything." That should have been the end of it. Instead, it got stuck in my head, so I did the normal thing first. I tried to find it on a map. If you're reading this and you want to check, you can. Pull up Apple Maps. Search Triad Apartments. Then try Google Maps. Try the university's interactive map. Try the PDF map that lists every parking lot, every dorm, every dining hall, every academic building. It isn't there. Not the name, not the label. Nothing. And the weird part is that this campus labels everything. Every dorm complex, every suite building, every tiny admin office. If there's a shed with a university logo on it, it's probably on the map. But Triad This place that physically exists, that takes up real space on university property, is missing like it was removed on purpose. At first, I thought maybe it was a nickname. Students call places weird names all the time. Maybe Triad was just slang for some normal building or an old name that got replaced. But the more I asked, the more that explanation fell apart. I started asking around carefully, not in a big public way, not on social media. I asked people I already knew, and I paid attention to how they reacted, not just what they said. The first person I asked was an RA I've known since freshman year. He's not dramatic. He's not a prankster, and I genuinely like him. I asked him if he'd ever heard of the Triad Apartments. He paused, just a little too long. Then he said no. When I pushed a bit, he changed the answer without meaning to. He said he might have heard the name once, maybe, but he didn't know what it was, and if I wanted housing information, I should go to Savitz. That reaction bothered me more than no would have. People forget things all the time, but that pause felt like someone thinking about what they were allowed to say. So I went to Savitz. I asked a housing staff member at the desk if they'd ever heard of Triad Apartments. She looked at me like I'd asked about a different school. She said she wasn't familiar with that building name and asked if I was sure I was talking about this campus. I told her I was sure. I described the general area as best as I could without sounding insane. She said she'd look into it and get back to me. She never did. A week or two later, I tried again, this time with a different staff member. And I changed how I asked. I said I was doing a class project about the history of campus residential housing. I asked if there had ever been older apartments that were taken out of use. That person's face didn't change much, but their voice did. It got smoother, like they were reading from something they'd said before. They told me there were older residential facilities that were no longer in use and pending evaluation, and if I wanted documentation, I should submit a records request. It sounded like a scripted answer, so I did it. I filed the records request the way they told me to. I expected to get denied, or to get nothing, or to get a generic, "we can't share that," was a short response that said the building had been decommissioned from residential use because of recurring infrastructure concerns, including drainage issues and confirmed presence of environmental hazards. No date, no timeline, no mention of when students were moved, no details about what the hazards were, no document trail I could follow. Just those phrases, perfectly vague. Perfectly clean. The kind of answer that sounds responsible while telling you almost nothing. Drainage issues. Environmental hazards. That is the official story, as far as I've been able to get one. But here's the part that kept bothering me. Flooding and mold happen all the time. You don't erase a building from every map because of mold. You don't act like a name is a foreign language because of drainage problems. You don't get that careful pause from an RA over a decommissioned apartment building. So I decided to find it myself. Here's how you get there. You walk toward Business Hall, the building that sits furthest out on that side of campus, the one that feels like it's already near the edge. You keep going past it, past the last normal parking lot in that direction. There's a lot there that's still weirdly operational. Cars still parked in it, lines painted, everything maintained, despite the fact that there's no obvious reason for it to be used the way it is. You keep going until you reach train tracks, and that's where most people stop, because after the tracks, there aren't signs, there isn't lighting. There aren't those usual campus markers that quietly tell you, yes, you're still on university property. Yes, you're still supposed to be here. It just starts feeling empty, like you've walked off the edge of campus and into a place that doesn't have a name. Most people turn back. If you don't, if you cross the tracks and keep walking, Triad is there. 3 connected apartment-style buildings, sitting in the open like they were placed there and then forgotten. Except they haven't been forgotten. They've been avoided. There's a difference. It's tucked away like something the rest of campus is trying not to look at. There aren't other dorms nearby, no academic buildings, no student foot traffic, nothing that makes sense around it. Getting there takes effort, and it takes even more effort to keep going when every part of the environment is telling you you're going the wrong way. The first time I saw it, I stopped and just stared. Not because it was crumbling or dramatic. It wasn't. That's part of what made it unsettling. It looked like a real place that could have housed real students. A building with a layout meant for people, not storage. It was quiet, though, empty in a way that didn't feel like abandonment so much as removal. And I kept thinking, how could something this large exist on campus property and not exist on paper? After that, I started collecting stories. I want to be very clear again. I cannot prove most of what I'm about to say. Some of it might be wrong. Some of it might be a rumor that got shaped by fear and repetition. But I've heard enough versions with enough overlap from people who don't know each other that I can't just write it off as one person's imagination. What I've consistently been told is that Triad used to house students normally. At some point, nobody agrees exactly when, but the range I've heard is from the early 2010s to around 2017. It just stopped. Students weren't assigned there anymore. It disappeared from the housing portal. There was no announcement, no campus email, no article in any student paper that anyone can find. It simply dropped out of the system. Then comes the part people whisper. The most common word that shows up in these conversations is isolation. The rumor is that Triad got repurposed quietly, not with an official new name, not with signage, not with any public language that would show up in a press release. It was used to hold students who had been flagged. Sometimes people say mental health crisis. Sometimes they say behavioral issues. Sometimes they just say students who were a problem, which is vague enough to be frightening all by itself. The way it's described isn't exactly punishment. It's described like containment. A 2-week minimum stay is a detail I have now heard 3 separate times from 3 separate contexts. They didn't know each other. They didn't tell it like they were repeating something they'd seen online. They told it like something they'd been warned about. And the other matching detail is the form letter. Supposedly, families would get a letter that framed it as voluntary wellness support. Something official sounding that didn't clearly say where their student was, how long they'd be there, or what the conditions were. A letter that sounded comforting enough to avoid questions. Again, I can't prove this. I haven't met anyone who has admitted they were held there. If they exist, maybe they don't want to talk about it. Maybe they can't. Maybe it never happened, but the consistency is what keeps pulling me back. Then there's the part of the story that people don't like to say out loud. In 2020, when COVID hit and the university emptied out, something happened inside Triad. That's the phrase. Something happened. The details shift depending on who's telling it. Some say there was still at least one student inside, held there far longer than 2 weeks. Some say isolation broke them. Some say whatever happened was violent. Some versions mention 2 other students, a young man and a young woman, who didn't make it out. I've heard names. I'm not writing them here. If any part of this is true, the people involved deserve better than becoming internet content. After that, the rumor says, Triad was shut down completely. Any staff involved were reassigned or gone. The project, if it existed, ended. The building went quiet. The records connected to it were handled in whatever way keeps a university out of headlines. And after that, Whenever anyone asks, the explanation is always something simple and throwaway. Flooding, mold, environmental hazards, COVID-delayed demolition. Pick a version. People in official roles seem to rotate them depending on how you ask and how much you seem like you'll push. Here's why I don't buy those explanations as the full story. None of them explain the silence. Mold doesn't make an RA pause like that. Flooding doesn't make a building vanish from every map. Environmental hazards don't make housing staff act like they've never heard the name of a building sitting on their own property. At some point, I got tired of daylight curiosity. I went back at night. I'm not doing it again. It wasn't the fun kind of scary. It wasn't, look at this creepy abandoned place, scary. It was the kind of wrongness that's hard to describe because it doesn't come with a clear threat. It's just a feeling that your body understands faster than your brain can. You can still see the operational parking lot behind you. There are cars there, normal cars, people's lives sitting in neat rows, maintenance lights, painted lines, something that says, yes, the university is still here. Then you cross the tracks and it's like the sound gets thinner. No voices, no laughter, no distant music from an open dorm window, no hum of campus life. Just dark space and your own footsteps and the building ahead, pale against the night. Triad didn't even look like a normal student apartment building in the dark. The shape and color made it feel more like a medical facility than housing. Too white, too blank, too flat. And the distance between it and everything else on campus was wrong for a school like ours, where buildings are usually packed tight together. This was a long walk past the last obvious campus structure, like someone had designed it to be out of sight and out of mind. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, staring at the windows. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Part of me expected it to look obviously abandoned. Broken glass, boards, graffiti. It didn't. Then, on the third floor, a light turned on. Not a normal, warm room light. It was the sickly yellow of a fluorescent bulb, and it flickered like it was struggling to stay alive. In that light, I saw a silhouette. It was standing perfectly still, face pressed against the window, just watching the parking lot. Watching me. It didn't look like a ghost. It looked like a person who had been standing still for a long time. Like someone trying to remember what the outside world is supposed to look like. It didn't move until I did. When I took a step back, it vanished, and the light cut off instantly. No click, no gradual fade, just gone. I turned to leave, and I nearly tripped over something on the far side of the road. There was a small memorial there. Not a full cemetery, not official, just a grave-like spot. A cross, flowers, glass shards. A name, little objects left behind like people do when they don't know what else to do with grief. My skin went cold. I spun back toward Triad. Another light was on, this time on a different floor on the opposite side. Same yellow glow, same flicker, like something had moved to another window to keep watching. I ran. I didn't wait to see if there was another silhouette. I didn't wait to see if I'd hear a door open. I just ran back toward campus, back toward the parking lot, back toward the noise and light that felt normal. After that night, I started asking people one specific question. Have you ever seen lights in that building? 5 students, different years, no obvious connection to each other, have mentioned lights in Triad's windows. Not every night. No pattern anybody can name, but enough that it's become its own quiet fact for the few people who know to look. Sometimes the windows light up. Sometimes you see movement. Upper floors late at night. No one seems to check. If anyone official checks, they aren't talking about it. The university's position, as far as I've been able to pin down, is still the same. decommissioned, not in use, awaiting next steps, which can mean anything. It can also mean nothing. It can mean we want you to stop asking. Or it can mean the building is being used in a way that will never appear in any public document. I don't know what happened in Triad. I don't know if the isolation story is true or if it's an exaggerated rumor built on a smaller, uglier truth. I don't know if anyone died there or if people just needed a story big enough to match the silence. What I do know is this: places can hold things. Not in the fun haunted house way, in the way a room can feel tense long after a fight happened in it. In the way a hospital hallway can feel heavy even when it's empty. In the way you can walk into certain buildings and immediately want to leave without being able to explain why. Triad feels like that from a distance, and up close it feels worse. The lights come on, and nobody explains them. The building sits out there past the tracks like a blank space the university built around on purpose. And if the rumors are even partly true, if Triad was ever used to hide students who were inconvenient or unstable or difficult, then the scariest part isn't the shadows in the windows. The scariest part is how easy it would be. How easy it would be for an institution to quietly move people into a building that officially isn't there, and then insist, with a straight face, that nothing is happening because nothing on paper says it is. I'm not sure I'm going to keep digging. I'm not sure I want to know what the clean answer is, if there is one. Some questions feel dangerous not because of what you might find, but because of who might notice you asking them. But I think people should know Triad is there. If you're a student at my school and you've ever felt like you were going crazy because you heard a name nobody else would repeat, you're not imagining it. There's a building out there that the campus pretends not to see. And if you ever find yourself walking past Business Hall, past the last parking lot, toward the tracks, and you feel that instinct telling you to turn around and go back to where things make sense, listen to it. Story 3. My eyesight is terrible. I know a lot of people say that, but I don't mean I squint at road signs terrible. My better eye is -11. My worse one is -14. At that point, you don't really feel the difference between them. Anything past -10 turns the world into blocks of color and soft shapes, and you learn to recognize things by instinct, sound, and context more than by sight. I still don't understand how I ended up like this. Both my parents only need reading glasses, and even that didn't start until recently. My dad probably wouldn't have known he needed them at all if his job didn't require regular vision checks. He's a sea captain. When I was a kid, that was the dream. I wanted to be like him more than anything. I wanted to stand on a deck in bad weather like it didn't matter, to know how to read water the way other people read a street map, to feel the ocean under my feet and not be afraid. I learned early that it wasn't going to happen. You don't become a sea captain when you can't see your own hand clearly without glass pressed to your face. So I did what kids do when the biggest dream dies. I replaced it with something close enough to hurt in the same way. I focused on water. I was a sea captain's kid, and if I couldn't conquer the ocean, I wanted the ocean to conquer me. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's the cleanest way I can explain what I felt. I was drawn to it in a way that didn't feel like a choice. We're born in water, after all. Maybe that's why we crave it. We try to imitate it with bathtubs and pools, but none of that ever felt like the real thing to me. The real thing was heavy and cold and alive. It had moods. It had hands. We lived by the sea, which meant I had constant access to the one thing I wanted most. It also meant I had constant opportunities to scare my parents half to death. They weren't angry because I wasn't a good swimmer. I was. I could swim better than most kids my age. Their problem was money. If I went into the ocean, I usually came out missing something. And most of the time, that something was my glasses. Salt water, waves, sand, rough play, me diving under again and again like I was trying to disappear. Glasses didn't last long on my face. I lost them so often that most of my apologies blend together now. So does the vague outline of my mother's disappointed expression, the way her voice tightened when she asked me how it happened again. But there's one day I remember clearly. Not because it was the day I lost my glasses, although I did, but because it was the day I almost didn't come back out of the water at all. I was 7. I don't know what I was thinking exactly. I don't think I had the words for it back then, but I remember feeling like I was teasing the ocean, like I was challenging it, like I was standing at the edge of something huge and hungry and saying, "Come on then, do it." I can still picture the shore in the soft, blurry way my childhood memories have. Bright sky, hot sand, the world smeared by salt and light. My mom was lying on a towel near the waterline, sunbathing and watching me in that half-attentive way parents do when they're trying to relax but can't fully stop monitoring. I remember looking back toward her one last time. Then the water took me. It didn't feel like I slowly drifted out too far. It felt sudden, like a trap snapping shut. One moment I was upright, and the next I was being yanked down and forward by a force that didn't care what I wanted. A wave hit wrong, or a current pulled, or my foot slipped in a dip I hadn't seen. I couldn't tell you which, because it all happened before I understood I was in trouble. My mouth opened to breathe or shout, and the ocean pushed inside. It flooded my throat, cold and violent. It made me swallow without meaning to. I coughed and choked, but the coughing just pulled more water in. The world above me, the bright patch of light where air was, kept moving farther away, or maybe I was moving away from it. Every time I kicked up, a new surge rolled over me and forced me down again. I wasn't thinking in sentences. I was thinking in panic and instinct. Arms flailing, legs kicking, chest burning. If I'd had time to think clearly, maybe I would have prayed. People always say that in a moment like that, you start praying, promising anything to anyone, if you can just breathe again. But there wasn't time. There was only water, and the terrifying realization that the water was winning. Then I saw something that I didn't have a name for at 7 years old. The light above me changed. It didn't just dim the way it does when a wave passes over. It disappeared in a solid, sudden way, like someone had put a lid over the world. For a second, I thought the sun had been swallowed. Later, I would think of it as my first eclipse. A shadow moved over me, close enough that I could feel it, not just see it. It blocked the light and made the water seem darker and deeper. And then something grabbed me. Not a gentle hand, not the kind of grip you expect from an adult trying not to hurt you. It was tight, like a clamp around my middle, around my ribs. I was yanked upward so fast I barely understood I'd changed direction. My face broke the surface and I coughed water out so hard it hurt. I sucked air in like it was the best thing I'd ever tasted. I was lifted higher and suddenly I wasn't in the ocean anymore. I was against the chest, held tight, the way you hold something you're terrified of dropping. I heard my mom's voice right next to my ear. "Oh my God," over and over. Her words were shaking and broken, like she couldn't believe she was able to say them. I wrapped my arms around her neck, and that's when I realized how scared I had been. Not just startled, not just panicked, terrified in a deep animal way. The kind of fear your body remembers even when your mind tries to bury it. I let her carry me back to shore. I didn't fight her. I didn't argue. I didn't even try to pretend I was fine. I didn't cry either, which might sound strange, but it's the truth. The ocean had already soaked me so completely that it felt like it had cried for me. I was drenched in salt water, coughing and shivering, and my mom rubbed me down with a towel that felt rough with sand stuck in it. Even though I couldn't see her face clearly without my glasses, I remember how scared she sounded. I remember the way her breath hitched when she talked, like she couldn't get enough air, even though she wasn't the one who had been underwater. It was the only time she didn't scold me for losing my glasses. Usually, losing them brought out anger first, because money was tight and replacing them wasn't easy. But that day, her voice was pure worry. She kept saying she thought she'd lost me. She kept saying she loved me. And as weird as this is to admit, I don't think I've ever felt as loved as I did right then, sitting wet and shivering on the sand, while she held me like she didn't trust the world to give me back if she let go. Not before, and not after. On the walk home, I stumbled constantly. Without my glasses, everything was a blur of shapes and color. The street was just a smear. The houses were smudges. The world was a painting someone had wiped with their hand. I remember wishing my dad was there, but he wasn't. He was somewhere out on the ocean, working. Being a sea captain wasn't a 9-to-5 job. If the sea owned your father, it didn't give him back just because his kid had a bad day. At home, I couldn't do much. I couldn't read. I couldn't play with small toys without getting frustrated. My mom made dinner, and when it was done, she sat with me and read me a book. I don't remember which book, and I hate that I don't. I wish I could pull that title out of my memory, because I struggle with insomnia now, and I swear nothing has ever calmed me down as fast as listening to her read that night. The sound of her voice, steady and close, made me feel like the ocean couldn't reach me anymore. I fell asleep early. The last thing I remember is her leaning down and kissing me goodnight. Then darkness wrapped around me, safe and complete, and I sank into it the way I'd almost sunk into the sea. The next memory I have is waking up to the sound of the front door unlocking. It was the middle of the night. I was still a little afraid of the dark back then, especially without my glasses, but I got out of bed anyway. The sound was wrong for that hour. It didn't match the quiet rhythm of the house. I stepped into the hallway blinking, trying to make out shapes. A person was standing there when she saw me. She screamed. It wasn't a small, startled noise. It was a full scream, the kind that should make a kid run back to their room and hide under the blankets forever. But it only confused me, because I knew that voice. I would have known it anywhere. It was my mom. She kept saying my name like she didn't believe I was real. She kept asking me how I got home. Her voice sounded shaky, almost hysterical. I didn't understand what she meant. I was home. I'd been home. She'd read to me. She'd kissed me goodnight, so why was she acting like she'd just found me after a disaster? This part is so burned into my mind because it's been told and retold so many times since then. By me, by my parents. Sometimes as a funny story when people want a strange icebreaker at parties. Sometimes as a can you believe this kind of tale on dates. Most people don't actually believe it. They smile and nod the way they do when a story is entertaining, but inconvenient to accept. My parents didn't treat it like entertainment. They treated it like something that broke their understanding of the day. Because while I was asleep in my bed, my mom had been at the police station. She had been giving a statement. All day, she was convinced I had drowned in the sea or been taken. She said she saw me go under and then nothing. She swore she'd run toward the water, screaming for help, and she couldn't find me. She said people searched. She said time moved in a sick blur. She said her throat was raw from calling my name. And when there was still no sign of me, when the beach gave nothing back, it turned into police and questions and that horrible official tone adults use when they're trying not to scare you even more. Then she came home, broken and exhausted, and opened the front door. And there I was, standing in the hallway like I'd never left. If you ask me what I remember from that day, I can tell you the ocean, I can tell you the shadow and the grip around my ribs, and my mom's voice in my ear telling me I was safe. I can tell you her reading to me and kissing my forehead, but I can't explain the gap between those things and what she says happened. I don't know who pulled me out of the water. I don't know who brought me home. When I try to picture the rescuer in my mind, all I can see is what my eyes were capable of seeing back then. A face as an oval shape with 3 dark holes, 2 eyes and a mouth floating in a blur, the same way I remember every face from the days when my glasses were gone. It could have been anyone, and that's what bothers me most, even now. It could have been anyone, but my mother swears it wasn't her. And for the rest of my life, I've been left with the same question, quietly scratching at the back of my mind like sand under a bandage. If my mom didn't bring me home that day, then who did? Story 4. I've never been good at making friends, and it isn't because I don't know how to talk to people. It's because I never stay anywhere long enough for it to matter. I'm a foster kid. That means I get moved around like a box that keeps ending up on the wrong doorstep. Different houses, different adults, different rules, different expectations. Most of the time, it isn't one huge incident that gets you moved. It's smaller things that stack up until a family decides they're done, or the system decides a change is for the best, and then you're packing your life into trash bags again. Right now, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. This is my 5th placement. This foster family is actually fine. It's just the 2 of them. The husband's name is Mark. He runs a small construction crew, mostly renovation jobs around the city. He's gone before I'm up most mornings and gets home late enough that we don't talk much beyond a nod and a quick, "You eat," as he passes through the kitchen. His wife, Linda, works part-time at a clinic nearby. She's the one who runs the house. She keeps things neat, keeps the fridge stocked, reminds me about school paperwork and dentist appointments. She talks to me more than he does. Not in a warm, motherly way, but in a practical way, like she's checking boxes and trying to do it right. Sometimes I catch something else in her face, like she's trying to understand me and can't quite. Maybe because they never had kids. They're not difficult to live with, and I don't give them a reason to be. The neighborhood is decent. And for the first time in a long time, I have a room that's actually mine. A door that closes, a bed no one else sleeps in, a space I can exist in without feeling like I'm taking up room someone's going to want back. I don't remember how I entered the foster system. I don't have a clear memory of it before. There are fragments, like half dreams, but nothing solid I can hold on to. One of the families I stayed with when I was younger used to tell me I was left on the steps of a church. They'd say it with this weird smile, like it was a fun fact, like it explained everything about me. Someone found me there, they said, and that's how I ended up in the system. I never knew whether it was true or whether they just liked watching me react. I didn't react. I didn't stay with them much longer after that either. I'm 16 now, turning 17 later this year. I go to Lakeview High. I joined 11th grade about 4 months ago, dropped in halfway through the school year like a new piece in a game already in progress. It took a bit to adjust. A new school always does. You're moving from room to room all day, reading signs, checking your schedule, trying not to look lost. For the first couple weeks, I was pulling my timetable out constantly, making sure I wasn't walking into the wrong class. Then it became routine. The same hallways, the same bells, the same tired expressions on teachers who had already used up their patience before lunch. I kept to myself at first. That's always easier. The name on my file is Hazel. I'm a guy, so yes, it always gets a reaction. First day in a class, the teacher reads attendance. They say, Hazel, and I answer. There's always that pause. The teacher looks up. A few kids giggle. A couple look around like they expect the joke to continue. It never fails. I was told my first foster family picked the name. They thought it would be funny. When I was younger, it used to get to me. I'd correct people. I'd snap back. I'd glare. None of it changed anything. If anything, reacting just gave them something to enjoy. Now I let it happen. People get bored fast if you don't feed them what they want. For a while, school was just something I got through. I showed up, did the work, kept my head down. But it didn't stay that way. One day in gym, before class really started, I was shooting hoops by myself. I've always been good at basketball. It's one of the few things that feels simple. The ball does what it does, your body does what it does, and for a while you don't have to think about anything else. A couple guys noticed and asked me to join their game. I said sure. After that, it kept happening. If a team needed one more, they'd call me over. If someone didn't understand something in class, they'd ask me instead of waiting for the teacher. At lunch, someone would wave me over instead of letting me find a corner table by myself. And that's how it started. I began to make friends. It happened so quietly I almost didn't notice at first. I'd hear my name, Hazel, and people would mean it in a neutral way, not a mocking way. I'd get asked to come along. I'd get included in plans. Then one day I realized I wasn't eating alone anymore, and I wasn't walking through the halls like a ghost. Derek was the first real friend. He was the basketball captain. He noticed I was good and didn't act threatened by it. He pulled me into games properly instead of treating me like a temporary extra. He was good in school, too. Since I joined late, I was behind in a couple classes just from missing the pacing, and he helped me catch up. He'd send me notes, explain assignments, tell me which teachers were strict and which ones you could actually talk to. He lived a couple houses away from my foster place. Only child. His parents were the type who smiled a lot and liked having people over. It just worked out that Derek and I started spending time together outside school, too. After that, we walked to school and back together most days. We talked about whatever came up. Teachers, sports, stupid memes, random things we noticed around town. It was normal. And I hadn't had normal in a long time. One morning on the way to school, Derek mentioned his birthday was coming up in a couple weeks. He said it casually, like it was no big deal. But I could tell it mattered to him. I didn't say much in return, but the comment stuck in my head. I don't really know when my birthday is. July, according to my file. But I've always suspected that was just a date someone wrote down because paperwork needed a date and no one had an answer. I never celebrated it, so it never mattered enough to argue about. Birthdays are hard to celebrate when you don't have a stable where and when you're never sure who will be around you next year. That afternoon, walking home, we passed a place on the corner that hadn't been open before. There was a big, bright sign we could see from down the street. North Star Family Pizza. Through the glass windows, you could see arcade machines, colored lights, and a small stage area at the back. On the stage were large mascot figures, bright costumes with fixed smiles. A banner across the window said something about a grand opening in 3 weeks. Fun for the whole family. That kind of cheerful corporate promise. I stopped without meaning to. Derek followed my gaze and smiled like he'd already imagined himself there. I told him I'd never really done that kind of thing. Birthday parties, group stuff, the whole loud, happy ritual of people showing up for you. He didn't make a joke. He didn't act sorry for me. He just nodded like he understood. and patted my shoulder did more than he probably realized. A couple days later, Derek showed up in the morning with this excited look like he'd been holding on to a surprise and couldn't wait any longer. He told me his dad knew someone connected to the pizza place through work. His dad was a realtor and apparently had the kind of network where knowing a guy actually meant something. Derek said he could get us in before it opened to the public. It would be a small group of classmates celebrating his birthday early, like a private test run. That's how it ended up happening. 10 of us from school, meeting at North Star Family Pizza to celebrate Derek's birthday. Everyone made their own way there that evening. Derek and I walked together because we lived nearby. The others were already outside when we arrived or showed up within a few minutes after. Lena and Nina, best friends since grade school, rolled up on bikes. Chloe came alone. Marcus and Soren got there at the same time as us. Ben was waiting by the door. Jacqueline stood near the window, peering inside like she was already judging the place. Kyle showed up last, out of breath, saying he'd lost track of time. That was everyone. From the outside, the place looked ready. The sign was up, the windows were clean, and the lights were on inside. The banner still hung there, grand opening in a week. Inside, though, it didn't feel finished. The lights were a little dimmer than you'd expect for a family pizza place. Decorations were up, but they didn't match, like someone had grabbed random party supplies and thrown them around. The carpet was new, but it wasn't laid properly everywhere. If you stepped near the edges, you could feel small ridges under your shoes, like the floor didn't want to lie flat. Soren noticed it too and said the place needed more work before opening next week. Arcade machines lined one side of the room, a mix of older cabinets and newer ones. They were all on, making that constant electronic hum and beat that fills your head after a while. At the far end, near the stage, 3 mascot figures stood in bright colors with wide painted smiles. 3 workers were there, one behind the counter, one near the machines, pretending to wipe things down while keeping an eye on us. Another went in and out from the back, bringing food. They handed out tokens and kept the pizza, fries, and soda coming in waves like they'd been told to keep us busy. For a while, it really did feel normal. People spread out between tables and machines. Someone went straight for the claw machine and immediately started complaining it was rigged. Derek and I ended up at one of the basketball arcade games, taking turns. He was laughing, competitive, talking trash in the harmless way people do when they're comfortable. Derek moved around a lot, checking on everyone, making sure nobody was left standing alone. It was one of the reasons people liked him. He didn't just shine on his own. He pulled other people into the light with him. Kyle was louder than the rest. He couldn't stay in one place for long. At one point, he wandered over to the mascot figures near the stage. One of them leaned slightly to the side, like it had been placed wrong or had settled over time. Kyle laughed and said it looked drunk. A couple of people walked over to see. Kyle pushed it lightly. It barely moved. He shrugged like he'd proven it wasn't scary, then said he was going to check something and headed down the hallway near the bathrooms. A while later, Jacqueline asked where Kyle went. One of the workers, the one who'd been near the machines, said Kyle's parents had called. Emergency at home. He had to leave fast. Kyle had asked him to tell us he'd explain later. Derek said he'd seen Kyle on his phone earlier. That seemed to make the story fit. We talked briefly about what kind of emergency it might be and hoped everything was okay. Derek asked the worker once or twice if Kyle had called back. The worker said no. Then we carried on without him because what else do you do at a birthday party besides pretend everything is fine? I stayed near the machines with Derek and Marcus joined us. For a while, it was still normal. The smell of pizza, the buzz of the arcade, the cheap sweetness of soda. Then we heard Lena's voice from across the room. She sounded upset talking to Jacqueline. Lena said she and Nina had argued, and Nina had stormed off saying she was going to the bathroom. She hadn't come back. Jacqueline told her Nina was probably just mad and needed a minute. Lena said she'd go find her and walk toward the hallway. We didn't make much of it at first. Teenagers argue, people go to the bathroom, friends cool off. But Derek leaned toward me and said quietly that Lena and Nina never fought. They'd been best friends for years. He'd never seen it. Time passed, and then Soren said he was hungry again. And that's when Derek realized something else. The worker who'd been bringing food hadn't come out in a while. The music in the place was still playing, but low, like it was coming from a speaker in another room. Marcus looked around and asked where the other two workers were. The one behind the counter, the one near the machines. None of us had seen them in a while, and it took me a second to understand why that mattered so much. Because adults don't just vanish while a group of kids are inside a building that isn't open to the public. Jacqueline walked to the front door and tried it. It didn't open. She pushed harder, then yanked her hand back like she'd burned herself. She said the handle was hot. Ben stepped forward and tested it too, and he jerked back instantly, eyes wide. From where I stood, I could see the metal had a faint red glow, like it had been heating for a long time. My mouth went dry. I asked where Lena and Nina were. They still hadn't come back. People stopped moving. The arcade noise suddenly felt too loud, like it was trying to cover something else. Everyone looked around, then at each other, faces shifting from confusion to fear. Derek said we needed to check the rest of the place. Lena and Nina had to be somewhere. Kyle had to be somewhere. He told us to split up just enough to cover more ground and to call out if we found anything. We shouldn't have listened. I went with Ben and Marcus. The three of us headed toward the hallway near the bathrooms. I'd been down that hallway earlier in the night, but now it didn't look the same. It was longer. That's the only word for it. The doorway into it was the same, but once you stepped through, the corridor seemed to stretch out farther than it should have. Marcus slowed down and said he didn't remember it being this long either. As we walked, the air got colder. The ceiling seemed lower, like the building was pressing down on us. The lights were dimmer too, a sick yellow that didn't reach the corners. We kept going anyway because turning around felt worse. I didn't remember it being there. That hit me hard, that simple thought. This door wasn't here before. Ben said he'd check it. Before Marcus or I could stop him, he stepped inside. The floor dropped out from under him. Ben turned back toward us for a split second. His eyes were wide. His hands flailed like he was trying to grab the air itself. Then he fell straight down and vanished like the room had eaten him. The door slammed shut. Marcus rushed forward and grabbed the handle. It wouldn't move. He yanked harder, then rammed his shoulder into it. Nothing. No give. No shake. Like it wasn't a normal door anymore. Like it had become part of a wall. I shouted Ben's name until my throat burned. No answer. Marcus and I stood there, breathing hard, staring at the door as if staring could force reality back into place. Then we looked at each other, and I knew we were thinking the same thing, even if neither of us wanted to say it. Whatever happened to Ben, we couldn't fix it, and staying in that hallway felt like volunteering to join him. So we turned around. The walk back felt wrong, too. The corridor seemed even longer than before, like it was stretching while we moved through it. The lights flickered once, then steadied. I tried not to look at the doors as we passed them, because I didn't want to see another one open. When we finally stepped back into the main room, Derek, Soren, Chloe, and Jacqueline were already there. All of them were staring at us like we were bringing bad news from a war zone. "Ben's gone," Marcus said. Derek's face tightened. Jacqueline made a small, broken sound in her throat and covered her mouth. Soren swore under his breath, low and helpless. Chloe just stared, blinking too fast. We explained what happened, talking over each other, trying to make it sound like a thing that could happen in the real world. Derek kept looking past us toward the hallway, like he expected Ben to walk out laughing and call it a prank. No one moved after we finished. No one knew what to do with what we'd just said. Then Chloe screamed. It was sharp and sudden, and it made all of us jerk like we'd been hit. She pointed toward the stage with a shaking hand and said one of the mascots had moved. We all looked. The three mascots stood where they'd been. Bright colors, fixed smiles, still and silent. "I saw it," Chloe said, voice breaking. It moved. Not even Soren, who always argued. We stepped back anyway, putting distance between ourselves and the stage. We ended up huddling closer together near the center of the room, like children trying to stay in the circle of light. There were 6 of us now. Me, Derek, Soren, Marcus, Jacqueline, Chloe. Chloe didn't take her eyes off the mascots. Derek told her to stay close, but she kept mouthing something, like she was counting under her breath. Derek asked her what she was saying. Story 5. I started a new job recently, and my life has gotten a lot busier than I expected. I had just graduated from college, and I took the first decent offer I could find. Something that paid enough for me to finally move into my own place. I didn't want to be back in my childhood bedroom any longer than I had to. I wanted a real start, something that felt like adulthood instead of waiting. The company made it even easier. They own a couple of apartments near the office, and they offered to rent me one for a heavily discounted price. The catch was that it meant moving far away from home, but the deal was too good to ignore. Cheap rent, close to work, no commuting stress, and a chance to prove myself right away. I told my family it was temporary, that I'd see how it went, but inside I was relieved to have an excuse to leave and build a life that was mine. The first week went great. I liked my coworkers. Everyone felt surprisingly normal for an office that ran odd hours. My boss seemed capable, not the kind of manager who panics and blames people when things get busy. The work itself clicked for me faster than I expected, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I'd found my footing, like I was in the right place at the right time. Then the weird stuff started. One of the downsides of the job is that we coordinate with people across multiple time zones. That means some shifts start early, and some tasks pop up at hours that don't match a normal routine. It wasn't ideal, but I've never been a deep sleeper. I've always been the kind of person who wakes up easily and checks the clock without thinking. I figured that would actually help me. Until my alarm stopped going off. The first time it happened, I woke up and knew immediately something was wrong. My body had that heavy, guilty feeling that hits you when you realize you've missed something important. I grabbed my phone and saw the time. I was late. Not by 5 minutes either. Enough that I had to rush, skip breakfast, and sprint through my morning like I was being chased. At first, I assumed it was my fault. Maybe my phone died overnight. Maybe I forgot to set the alarm. Maybe I hit something in my sleep. I'm not the kind of person who blames technology right away, because usually the problem is human error. But then it happened again, and again, and the worst part was that each time I checked my phone, the alarm had been set. The sound was on. Everything looked normal. There was no reason it shouldn't have gone off. I tried changing the alarm tone. I tried setting multiple alarms. I tried placing my phone across the room so I'd have to get up to turn it off. None of it worked. I would wake up late anyway, sweaty and confused, staring at my screen like it was lying to me. After a few days, I started to get suspicious in a way I couldn't explain. Suspicious not of the phone, but of the apartment. The place was small but nice, clean enough, quiet enough, close enough to work that it almost felt too convenient. The company called it an employee benefit. I started to wonder if it came with strings I didn't understand. So I bought an old-fashioned alarm clock, the kind with its own power source and buttons big enough that nothing could glitch. In my head, it seemed logical. If the phone alarm was failing for some weird software reason, a separate clock would fix it. The first night I used it, I set it carefully and placed it right beside my bed, where I couldn't possibly miss it. I still woke up late. I sat up fast and stared at the clock like I'd caught it doing something. The time was hours past when it should have gone off. My stomach sank. I checked the settings. The alarm was set correctly. The volume was up. The battery indicator was fine. It should have been ringing. It wasn't. I went to work that day with my nerves buzzing under my skin. I tried to act normal, but I kept thinking about the clock, about the way it just didn't do its job. I didn't want to sound dramatic, so I waited until I had a casual moment with one of my coworkers and brought it up like it was a joke. "Have you ever had trouble with alarms going off around here?" I asked. "Like in the company apartments?" My coworker laughed immediately. "You sound a lot like Dave," they said, shaking their head. I blinked. "Dave? The guy you replaced. He was obsessed with being on time, too," they said, right up until the end. "What happened to him?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Did he move on to a better job?" My coworker's expression changed. Their smile disappeared like someone flipped a switch. "Oh," they said quietly. "You didn't know?" I felt my face go cold. "Know what? Dave didn't quit," they said. "He had a heart attack in that apartment. The one they gave you." They looked around like they didn't want anyone else to hear. "Stress," they said. They found him on a Tuesday morning, 3 hours after his shift was supposed to start. His alarm was still ringing when the landlord opened the door. I didn't know what to say. I nodded like I understood, because that's what you do at work when someone tells you something awful and you don't want to make it worse. But inside, everything felt wrong, because my alarms weren't going off. And Dave's alarm had been ringing. That night I went home and sat down on the edge of my bed, suddenly aware of everything in my bedroom like it was evidence. The bed frame, the mattress, the nightstand, the carpet, the little marks in the wall where something used to hang. I kept thinking, Dave slept here, Dave lived here, Dave died here. I stared at the digital clock on the nightstand. The red numbers glowed calmly in the dark, like a little heartbeat. I didn't sleep that night. I told myself I was being smart, that I was proving something to myself. I set the alarm for 3 a.m. I put the clock on the floor where I could see it even if I kept my eyes mostly closed. I lay on my back under the covers, the room dark and silent, and I waited. The minutes felt thick. My body tried to drift, but I forced myself awake. Every time my mind started to slip, I tightened my fingers into the sheet and focused on the glowing numbers. At 2:59 a.m., the room changed. The air got colder, not in a gentle nighttime way, but suddenly, like someone opened a freezer door. My skin prickled. The smell hit next, an ugly, stale smell that reminded me of nursing homes and old coats pulled out of storage. It was the smell of someone who had been gone from the world for a while. I barely breathed. I kept my eyes slivered, just enough to watch. The red digits flickered. 2:59. Then 3 o'clock. The alarm didn't beep. Instead, something moved under my bed. A hand emerged first, gray and translucent, like fog pulled into the shape of skin. It flickered in the moonlight that came through the blinds. It didn't reach carefully the way you'd expect. It came out with purpose. It slammed its palm down on the clock. Not a gentle press on the snooze button. A hard, flat slap that should have made noise, but didn't. It was like the sound had been swallowed before it could exist. And then I heard a laugh fill the room. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. And it didn't come from any one direction. It felt like it was inside the walls, inside the floor, inside my own skull. My whole body went rigid. Then the head followed. A face rose slowly over the edge of the mattress, like someone pulling themselves up from deep water. The skin was stretched tight and dull, not quite the right color for anything living. The eyes looked sunk in. The mouth was a bruised blue line that curled into something that wasn't a smile. He leaned close enough that I couldn't pretend it wasn't real. Cold blue lips pressed against my ear. His breath hit my skin, wet and rotten, smelling like decomposition and something sour underneath. It made my eyes water and my stomach turn. "My shift isn't over," he whispered, voice rough like air scraping through dead lungs. "And you're sleeping in my bed." I screamed. I threw the covers off and scrambled out of bed so fast I nearly fell. I didn't stop to grab my phone charger. I didn't stop to put on shoes. I ran out of the bedroom, out of the apartment, and down the hallway like something was right behind me. I didn't look back until I was outside. Even then, I kept running until I reached my car. Now I'm sitting here with the doors locked, hands shaking on the steering wheel, trying to decide what I'm supposed to do next. My apartment is right there, silent and dark behind those windows, like nothing happened. Like I didn't just see a dead man reach out from under my bed and kill an alarm with his hand. I don't know if I should tell my coworkers. I don't know if they'll think I'm crazy. I don't know if they already know and don't say it out loud because saying it out loud makes it real. I don't know if I should go back inside to get my things or if that's exactly what whatever is in there wants. All I know is this. Dave didn't quit. Dave didn't leave. And it didn't sound like he planned to. Story 6. I don't know how to explain what's been happening to me, so I'm just going to tell it exactly the way it happened. You can decide what it means. 3 weeks ago, I found a small door behind my bathroom mirror. Not a medicine cabinet, not a hidden shelf. A door, about 2 feet wide, cut into the wall like it had been built there on purpose and then covered up. I don't know how long it had been there. I don't know how I never noticed it. I've lived in this apartment for 2 years. I stand in front of that mirror every morning. I brush my teeth there. I shave there. I've wiped steam off it with my sleeve 1,000 times, and I never once thought to push it. That's what bothers me most. Not that the door existed. That I didn't see it. The mirror didn't swing open like it was on normal hinges. It gave under my hand with a slow, stiff movement, like it hadn't been opened in a long time. Behind it was a dark space between the studs. I expected dust, maybe old pipes, maybe a builder's mistake. Instead, there was a notebook. It was wedged in the back like someone had hidden it carefully. The cover was plain, dark, and worn at the corners from handling. And written on the front, in thick, familiar letters, was my name. I took it out and stood there with it in my hands, staring, waiting for my brain to offer a reasonable explanation. Something like, "You bought that months ago and forgot." Or, "This came with the apartment." Or, "It belongs to the last tenant." But the handwriting was mine. There was no doubt. I recognized the way the letters leaned, the little habits I've never been able to break, the way I press harder on certain strokes. I've signed enough forms and written enough grocery lists to know my own hand. I want you to understand something about me before I keep going. I'm not a forgetful person. I don't lose time. I don't zone out and wake up somewhere else. My memory has always been the one thing I trusted about myself. Faces, conversations, details that other people miss. I tend to remember them. That's part of why what happened next hit me so hard. I opened the notebook and started reading. The first entry was dated 14 months ago, March 3rd. The sound came back tonight. I don't want to write about the sound. I stared at that line for a long time. My first reaction wasn't fear, it was irritation, because it looked like something I would write if I was trying to be dramatic. Like I was writing a horror story and wanted to build suspense. It didn't feel like a journal entry. It felt like a hook. But then I flipped the page. Another date, another entry, and another. Each one was short, uneven, like it had been written fast, maybe in a hurry, maybe with shaking hands. The thing that stopped my breath was this. I didn't remember writing any of it. Not just, it feels distant. Not maybe I forgot. I mean, there was no memory at all. Nothing in my mind that matched the act of sitting down and writing those words. No image of pen in hand, no place, no time of day, no reason why. It wasn't like forgetting where you put your keys. It felt like reaching for a memory and finding empty space, like a tooth missing in your mouth that your tongue keeps returning to. I kept reading. The dates weren't every day. They were scattered. But the pattern became obvious fast, because every entry seemed to point to the same idea without naming it directly. Missing time, confusion, things changing in my apartment in ways I couldn't account for. Then I hit an entry that made my stomach tighten. Gone. That whole day, just gone. Not forgotten the way you forget a boring afternoon. I mean, there is nothing there when I reach for it. Like a hole in the middle of my life that someone patched over so neatly, I never noticed the stitching. I stood there in the bathroom with the notebook open, trying to test my own mind. I tried to remember yesterday. I tried to remember last week. I tried to pull up a random day from a month ago. Most of it was there. Normal memories, routine stuff, work, groceries, a phone call, a show I watched. Nothing unusual. And yet the words on the page felt true in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't that I believed them logically. It was that some part of my body recognized them the same way you recognize your own name when someone says it across a crowded room. I turned the page again. April 17th. I tried to call my sister today. I don't know why I couldn't finish dialing. That line made me pause. Because I don't have a sister. I'm almost certain I don't. I'm an only child, have always been an only child. There are no childhood stories about siblings. No photographs. No name. No half-remembered family drama. My parents never mentioned another kid. There isn't even the kind of weird silence that suggests something is being hidden. So why would I write that? I told myself it had to be a dream I'd written down. Or maybe a writing exercise. Maybe I'd started a fictional journal and forgotten about it. That explanation made me feel better for about 2 seconds. Then I read the next entry. June 2nd. The light is wrong again. It's always the same in here. I've stopped checking what time it is because it doesn't seem to matter. I put the notebook down and looked out of the bathroom into my apartment. The light was on. A lamp in the corner of the living room. It cast the same soft, flat glow it always did. Nothing strange, nothing flickering, nothing dramatic. Still, I found myself thinking about sunlight. The last time I had watched the sun move through my place. Morning light, late afternoon light, that warm gold you get right before sunset, the way shadows shift across a wall without you noticing until you suddenly do. I tried to find a memory of that, and I couldn't. That wasn't the same as forgetting a specific day. It was like the entire concept of changing daylight inside my apartment had been erased from my mind. My blinds were always down, sure, but not always. I was sure of that. I had to be. I picked the notebook back up. August 9th. I found the door again. I always find it, and then something happens and I forget. I think I'm supposed to forget. I think that's the whole mechanism. I read that entry 4 times. I always find it. I stood barefoot on the bathroom tile and stared at the open mirror, at the dark space behind it, and I felt the sickest kind of fear I've ever felt. Not the fear of something attacking you. The fear that your own mind has been edited and you didn't notice. How many times had I done this? How many times had I opened that mirror, found that notebook, and read those words? How many times had I stood exactly where I was standing and felt exactly what I was feeling? And then forgotten it all. I reached into the cavity behind the mirror and felt around the edges. My fingertips brushed the rough plaster. In the back corner, taped flat so carefully I nearly missed it, was a piece of paper. I pulled it free. A phone number written in my handwriting. Under it, 2 words. Don't forget. That's when my hands started shaking for real, not metaphorically. My fingers trembled so badly the paper fluttered. I hadn't noticed until I saw it happening. I didn't call the number that night. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe, or some stubborn part of me that didn't want to find out what would happen if I actually followed the instruction. There's a kind of dread that doesn't come from imagining something bad. It comes from imagining something true. Instead, I kept reading. The entries got shorter as the months went on. The handwriting grew smaller, tighter, shakier, like the person writing it was afraid someone would see the pages, or afraid they wouldn't have enough time to finish. Some words were smudged, as if the ink had been smeared by a damp hand. October 14th. I think I understand what this is now. I really wish I didn't. The next one was worse, not because of what it said, but because of what it forced me to do. November 1st, I tried the door at the end of the hallway. It doesn't open from this side. I can hear things through it sometimes. Voices, machinery. I live in an apartment. I don't have a hallway that ends in a door. That thought was so certain that it almost made me laugh. It was like reading a lie about yourself, something you could disprove by simply looking. So I walked out of the bathroom and into the hall, mostly to prove the notebook wrong. And there it was, a door at the end of the hallway, white, the same shade as the walls, small silver handle, plain like it had always belonged there. Like it was so obvious it didn't deserve attention. Except I swear to you I had never seen it before. I've lived here for 2 years. I know the layout of my own apartment. The hallway ends in a blank wall. It always has. That wall has a small scuff mark near the baseboard that I've meant to paint over since I moved in. The scuff mark was still there, but now it was next to a door. I walked toward it slowly. I didn't want to, but my body did it anyway, like curiosity was pulling me by a string. I reached out and touched the handle. It was cold. Not metal is cool cold. Not the apartment's drafty cold. It felt like I'd touched something that didn't belong in the same temperature as the rest of the room. The cold sank into my fingertips and stayed there. I turned the handle. It didn't open. I pushed. Nothing. But I could hear something on the other side. Breathing. Slow. Steady. Mechanical. like a machine working very hard to keep a rhythm going. I stepped back, heart pounding, and went straight back to the notebook, because at that point, the notebook wasn't just weird anymore. It was accurate. It was describing things I didn't want to admit were real. The last written entry was dated the same day I found the notebook, 3 weeks ago, a day I had no memory of at all. We keep finding this and we keep forgetting, and I don't know how many loops we've been through. I stopped counting because counting made it worse. Call the number. That's all. Just call. I heard them talking through the door again last night. They're discussing stopping. I don't know what stopping means here, but I know it isn't good. I know if they stop, something ends. At the very bottom of the last page, there was one final line. It was so faint it was almost invisible, like the pen had barely touched the paper. If you can read this, then you haven't come back yet. Please come back. That line hit me like a punch. It didn't feel like a message from past me. It felt like a message from a version of me that was trapped somewhere I couldn't see, reaching out through paper. I sat on the bathroom floor for a long time with the notebook in my lap, staring at the phone number. My phone was on the counter. I kept thinking, if I call, something will happen. Not in a horror movie way, in a personal way. Like I would cross a line and I wouldn't be able to uncross it. But I was more scared of forgetting again. I was more scared of waking up tomorrow and finding the mirror closed and the notebook gone and my mind smooth and clean, like none of this had ever happened. So I called. No one answered. The line rang once, maybe twice, and then it connected the way calls sometimes connect before someone speaks. For a second, I heard it, that same mechanical breathing sound I'd heard behind the hallway door. Slow and steady, like a machine pulling air in and pushing it out again. And then the line went dead. I'm writing this here because I needed someone to see it before it disappeared from my head. Because right after the call, I looked up at the bathroom mirror and realized it was pushed slightly open. And I had no memory of closing it after I found the notebook, which meant the forgetting had already started. I can't describe the feeling of that moment. It wasn't like, oh no, I'm forgetting details. It was like watching your hands loosen around something important and realizing you can't make them grip tighter. Like your own mind is slipping out of your control 1 inch at a time. I don't know how long I sat there before everything started to shift. The apartment didn't dissolve like a dream. It didn't melt or blur. It simply stopped feeling solid, like a set built too neatly, like wallpaper over a real wall. The air felt thinner. The silence felt staged. And then I knew, not as a theory, as a fact that had been waiting under everything. None of it was real. I wasn't in my apartment. I hadn't been in my apartment for 2 years. I was in a coma. 2 years ago, I was in a car accident. My body survived, but my mind went somewhere else. It built a world that felt normal enough to live in. It built a routine. It built a version of me that woke up, brushed his teeth, went through the day, and never noticed that the light didn't change. Some part of me knew the truth anyway. Some part of me kept leaving clues. The small door behind the bathroom mirror wasn't a door in drywall. It was a crack in the story my brain was telling itself. The notebook was my own mind trying to create a record strong enough to survive the reset. The door at the end of the hallway was the hospital room door. The voices I thought I heard through it were nurses and doctors. The machinery was real machinery. The breathing sound was the ventilator. The phone number was my mother's number, the same one she's had for 30 years. But I couldn't remember it clearly enough to dial it inside the dream. So I wrote it down for myself again and again, because it was the only lifeline I could think of. I woke up 4 days ago. I'm writing this now because the doctors say it will help me process it. They say it's normal to feel confused, scared, and grief-struck after waking up from a long coma. They say it can take time for the brain to adjust. I nod and agree, and I try to do the exercises they give me, and I let my family talk, and I let them cry because they deserve that. They waited for me longer than I can understand. But what I can't stop thinking about is that last line in the notebook. Please come back. Because the truth is, I almost didn't. Not because I wanted to die. Because inside that apartment, I thought I was alive. And a part of me was ready to stay there forever, sealed inside a world that felt safe and familiar, even if it wasn't real. I keep wondering how close I came to letting them stop, whatever stopping meant, turning off machines, giving up hope, closing the door for good. And I keep wondering one more thing, the question that scares me more than the accident itself. If my mind could build a whole world to keep me from waking up, how do I know it isn't trying to build another one right now? Because sometimes, in the middle of the night, when the hospital is quiet and the lights in the hallway don't change, I swear I can still hear breathing. Slow, mechanical, steady. Story 7. I've made a terrible mistake. A mistake so big I don't have a normal word for it. And I'm sorry in a way that doesn't even feel human anymore, because I don't know if sorry matters when you've damaged something as basic as time. I don't know if I can undo what I did. I don't know if anything can reach outside the loop I'm trapped in. But I keep writing this anyway, because it's the only thing that still feels like an action instead of a reaction. Maybe screaming into the dark counts as penance. Maybe it's the closest thing I'll ever get to prayer. I don't even know who this message is for. Maybe nobody. Or maybe, if mercy is real, if mercy exists as a law the universe still respects, this will be read by someone who hasn't reached the point where I ruin everything. Someone who can stop me before I press that button for the last time. My name is Marcus. I am, or I was, or I keep being, depending on what you think being means in a world that restarts. A postgraduate student in experimental quantum physics, I was obsessed with time, not clocks, not scheduling, not productivity. Time as a concept, time as a surface, time as a thing you could touch if you were smart enough. I wanted the big breakthrough. I wanted to be the person who proved the impossible. I got what I wanted. I just didn't understand the price. I'm going to start from the beginning. I'm copying parts of my journal notes below, with some details revised, and with the key theoretical pieces intentionally left out. Not because I'm trying to sound mysterious, because I'm terrified someone else could replicate what I did. If you're reading this in a reality where time still moves forward in the normal way, please understand, you should not try to build this. Curiosity is not worth it. Ambition is not worth it. Friday, April 28th, 2028, after months of tinkering, I finally finished the device. It sat on my workbench like a lump you don't notice at first, the way a tumor can sit inside a body, quiet, patient, waiting for the moment it becomes obvious what it is. It wasn't beautiful. I never cared about beauty. I cared about results. It was a mess of copper coils around a central core of neodymium magnets, threaded with fiber optic cable I'd pulled out of a decommissioned server farm. The casing was a repurposed thermos. I cut a clean slot into the side and embedded a small digital display. Red numbers, blinking like a cheap alarm clock. I called it the lemniscate, the infinity symbol, in geometry. I was proud of the name. I thought it sounded like control. The theory had come to me years earlier in grad school while I was reading a paper on quantum decoherence. I was working as both a research assistant and teaching assistant for my advisor, Dr. Priya Anand. She's brilliant, intimidating, and annoyingly good at being right. When she saw the notes I'd scribbled in the margins, she called them charmingly deluded. She passed the paper anyway, like you might pat a kid on the head for being imaginative. I didn't forget it. I wrote charmingly deluded on a sticky note and put it on my bathroom mirror, where it slowly yellowed and curled at the corners over the years. I told myself it was motivation. It was also a warning I refused to hear. My idea was simple in a way that makes me sick now. I believed time, at the quantum scale, was not a river, not a line you travel down, more like a surface, like the skin of a drum. If you strike a drum, the vibration spreads outward. It moves across the surface, it ripples, it echoes. I believed time could do something similar, that if you applied the right energy at the right frequency to a localized field, you could create a ripple, forward and backward, not a metaphorical ripple, an actual one, a real reversion. The hard part wasn't understanding it. The hard part was powering it. My calculations said I needed a burst of energy on the scale of a small reactor, compressed into a single pulse lasting under 40 microseconds, focused into a space no larger than a room. If the pulse wasn't strong enough and clean enough, the strike wouldn't hold. The vibration would dissipate, and nothing would happen. That kind of energy is not something a grad student can legally access. So I stole it. 15 miles south of the city is the Jameson Lake Nuclear Power Plant. In the last few years, with AI systems growing everywhere, small nuclear plants became more common and more automated. More power, fewer humans watching every knob and wire. I moved closer. I got access under the excuse of research. That part wasn't even unusual. Students were in and out of the place constantly for various projects. Then, quietly, I built a siphon. A covert tap into the plant's output. I won't explain how. I won't give the details. It doesn't matter, except for one fact. I got away with it. On the morning of April 28th, 2028, I sat alone in my kitchen drinking black coffee. My hands were steady. My mind felt clear. I told myself this was science, not obsession. That was the day I activated the lemniscate for the first time. At first, nothing happened. I looked at the microwave clock, 9:07 a.m. I pressed the activation button, and the world lurched. It didn't hurt. I expected pain, honestly. Some kind of electrical shock through my nerves. A splitting headache. Something. Instead, it felt like missing a step in the dark. That brief falling sensation before your foot finds the stair. Except it didn't last a heartbeat. It stretched across about 4 seconds. My vision blurred. The coffee cup on the table flickered. Gone. Present. Gone. The light through the window shifted, dimmer for a moment, then normal again. The microwave clock now read 9 a.m. 7 minutes. Exactly 7 minutes. I sat very still. Then I smiled. I wish I could go back and slap myself across the face, hard enough to change my brain chemistry. May 2028. For the first week, I'd read enough fiction. I knew time travel stories always punish the person who thinks they can handle it. I thought I was different because I had data, because I had discipline, because I had a method. That first week was the last time I was careful about anything. I tested the lemniscate constantly. I treated it like a lab instrument. I measured its limits. I wrote everything down. I confirmed the loop was always the same length, exactly 420 seconds from activation to reset. Objects returned to their previous positions. Biological states reverted too. If I cut my finger within the 7-minute window, The cut disappeared on reset. If I burned a piece of toast, it was unburned again. If I spilled coffee, it was back in the cup. And the most important part, the part that made me feel like a god, was that my memory stayed. Everyone else forgot. Everything else forgot, but I didn't. I tested it on lab mice. I placed them within different distances of the device and watched the changes in behavior. Eventually, I confirmed something strange. Any living creature within roughly 15 feet of the lemniscate retained memory across the reset. That's why I could remember. That's why the mice sometimes look startled in ways they shouldn't have, like they knew something had happened even if their bodies said it hadn't. I started thinking of myself as the eye of a hurricane, still, calm while the world spun backward around me. I used it for small things at first. A broken mug, a burnt pizza, a dish dropped on the floor, a stupid mistake in an email, little accidents, little comforts. I told myself I couldn't do anything truly meaningful anyway. With only 7 minutes, I couldn't stop a car crash across town. I couldn't prevent a crime if I learned about it too late. My device was fixed in my house, tied to the stolen power line. The radius of my control was small, so I started using it for things that could happen within 7 minutes. Money was an easy one. I made bets. I made small stock moves. Not enough to raise alarms, just enough to reassure myself I wasn't wasting my life on a toy. But money wasn't the point. The point was time. I wanted to own it. Somewhere around the 3rd week, I started noticing the cost. My body was fine, my blood tests were normal, my heart rate, my appetite, my weight. Everything looked like it always had. The cost was in my mind, or deeper than my mind, like something in the idea of me began to fray. When you reset time and you're the only one who remembers, every moment becomes cheap. Conversations become drafts. Every phone call becomes an earlier version of itself. Every bite of food might be the 3rd bite of that same bite. Every laugh might already be a repeat. But the biggest change was sleep. Sleep requires surrender. It requires letting time happen to you while you are not watching it. And after the lemniscate, surrender felt like death. When I slept, I couldn't reset. If something happened in my sleep, it would happen and I wouldn't be able to catch it in time. I couldn't stand that. So I dragged my mattress into the room with the lemniscate. I slept with the activation button within reach, like it was a loaded gun under my pillow. I liked feeling the button under my thumb, not because I needed it, because it soothed me. I told myself that was rational. It wasn't. Around this time, I started digging into less respectable research. The kind that doesn't get published, not always because it's wrong, but because the person writing it has lost the social ability to be believed. Papers on obscure preprint servers, personal websites with broken links, documents written by people who used to have university affiliations and then suddenly didn't. I told myself I was expanding my knowledge. What I was really doing was looking for someone to tell me I wasn't insane. That's how I found a paper by Dr. Emmeline Voss, formerly University of Zurich, dated July 2027. The title was long and academic, but the meaning of it was basically, if you reverse time locally, there are consequences. I read it 3 times over 2 days. Voss's argument was simple and horrifying. She agreed with the time as a surface framework, but she said the surface doesn't just vibrate when struck. It remembers. Every reset leaves a mark, a tiny distortion in the temporal substrate. A resonance scar, she called it. It's not visible, but it accumulates, like hitting the same spot on a drum again and again. For a while, a drum holds. It flexes and returns to rest. But if you strike it in exactly the same place at exactly the same frequency, often enough something changes. It doesn't just crack in the normal way. It locks. The membrane becomes rigid at the point of repeated impact. It loses the ability to return to rest. Voss called it temporal resonant fixation. And then she did something that made my blood run cold. She estimated a threshold. She admitted the model was speculative, but she still gave numbers. Hundreds of reversions could do it. Depending on the energy input and the precision, she predicted the failure point might come somewhere between 300 and 800 resets. When I read that, I opened my notebook and counted my activations. 412. I stared at that number like it was a sentence. Then I did what arrogant people always do when confronted with a warning. I told myself the paper was speculative. I told myself Voss was probably brilliant, but unstable. One of those researchers who sees patterns everywhere. I told myself a lot of things, and I kept pressing the button. July 2028. The anomaly showed up in early July. Once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. The reset had always been near instant. The 4-second lurch, the snap back, the world returning to exactly what it was. But now there was a delay. At first it was barely measurable, just a fraction longer. Then, a full second. Then, too, on July 9th, the delay stretched long enough that I felt the world hanging in place. Not rewinding, not moving forward, just stuck like a video frozen mid-frame. Like a film jammed in a projector. After a few seconds, it still reset and everything looked normal. But the fact that it could stall at all terrified me. I filled notebooks, I ran calculations over and over. I checked the device for hardware failure, I checked the stolen power line, I checked my own sanity. The delay kept growing, and my thoughts started changing. I grew up around Catholic imagery. My grandmother kept the Book of Revelation by her bed, not like a devotional object, but like a favorite story. I read it as a kid and felt fascinated by its symbols, its violence, its cosmic scale. So when I started thinking about what I was doing to time, I started using words I didn't like. Abomination. Not morally exactly, structurally. Like there are things the universe isn't built to tolerate. Things that don't fit, and reality reacts to them like an immune system. By July 14th, the delay was about 6 seconds. By July 17th, on July 19th, I triggered a reset while testing another idea, and the delay stretched into something like 20 seconds. I stood in an awful white silence, a world neither past nor present, and I heard something, not a normal sound, more like the idea of sound. Like the echo that stays in your ears after a loud blast, except this wasn't an afterimage. It felt like a vibration coming from everywhere and from every when. It felt like it was coming from a very specific point in time that didn't have a place in space. A part of me understood it immediately. It was coming from the end of things. I told myself it was sleep deprivation. I told myself it was electromagnetic interference. I told myself anything that let me keep going. By then, the lemniscate had become more than a tool. It was a habit, a need, a compulsion I dressed up as scientific curiosity. I activated it 608 times before the end. August 2028. August 2nd was hot early. 93 degrees at 8 a.m., the kind of heat that makes the day feel sharp and tense before anything even happens. I woke at 7:46, barely rested, with my hand on the lemniscate like a child clutching a comfort object. It was warm against my palm, familiar. I made coffee and stood at the window and watched the trees between the houses. Everything looked normal. A normal Wednesday. A normal world. I hadn't activated the device in 11 days. I truly had been trying to stop. I had been trying to let the membrane, the way Voss described it, recover. I told myself maybe the scar would smooth out if I left it alone long enough. At 8:14 a.m., I walked to the workbench and held the lemniscate up in the sunlight. The digital display blinked the time like it always did, red numbers washing my skin. I swear I didn't mean to activate it, but my thumb found the button anyway, the way your tongue finds a loose tooth even though it hurts. The body doing what it has learned to do before the mind has a chance to stop it. I pressed. The lurch came. The familiar drop in the stomach, the 4-second plunge. And then the delay. It felt like 30 seconds now. A long, stretched pause where the world held its breath. Then the reset started. Light shifted. Objects blurred. The kitchen tried to snap backward into place. And then it stopped. Not paused. Not delayed. Stopped. I was standing in my kitchen microwave clock, 8:14. Coffee cup, half full. Morning light, normal. Everything looked fine, but the lemniscate wasn't fine. It began to scream. Not metaphorically. It made a high sustained frequency that it should not have been able to produce. It had no speakers, no audio system. And yet, the sound was there, drilling into my teeth, into my ears, behind my eyes. The display wasn't showing the time anymore. It was cycling numbers so fast my vision couldn't track them. It was counting up, past 7 minutes, past hours, past days, past weeks, past years. The numbers accelerated until they became a smear of light. I dropped it on the table. The sound didn't stop. I ran outside, hands over my ears, desperate to escape it. Outside, the morning was too bright. I looked up. The sun was the wrong size. I don't mean in a poetic sense. I mean it literally. It was larger than it should have been, bloated, trembling at the edges, its corona whipping and curling in shapes that made my brain refuse to interpret what I was seeing. This wasn't the slow, normal death of stellar evolution. This wasn't in millions of years. This was now. This was the sun as it would appear at some endpoint that humans were never meant to witness. The sky around it had gone white, like an overexposed photo. My neighbors came outside. I saw them stepping onto lawns and driveways, squinting upward, confused and frightened. Mrs. Cabrera across the street, in her bathrobe, hand shielding her eyes, the Thompson dog barking nonstop. Everything felt far away, like sound itself had been stretched thin. In that moment, I felt two things at once. The first was pure terror, the kind you feel when you realize you're seeing something you are not supposed to be able to see, like catching reality making a mistake. The second was understanding. The knowledge I'd chased for years arrived all at once, not as words, but as certainty. I had broken time. I ran back inside and looked at the lemniscate on the table. The numbers had stopped climbing. They were stuck on a value too large for the display, overflowing it. Then, slowly, the counter began to descend, counting down. I went back outside. The sun began to contract. It vibrated. The corona collapsed inward. The white sky shifted to orange, then red, then to a color I don't have a name for, like something burning from the inside out. A timescale crushed into a moment. Then came the light, the first wall of it, arriving before anything else, because light always arrives first. I understood what I was watching, the death of the sun, not far in the future, not in a simulation. Right then, and I understood what that meant. This wasn't a personal reset. This was everything. Mrs. Cabrera, the Thompson dog, the trees, every person, Every song, every book, every face, every morning, every language, every memory. 8 minutes of light travel time, and then Earth would be sterilized. 8 minutes later, the explosion reached us. It killed me, and then I came back. That is the part I can't explain without feeling sick. Because the lemniscate didn't just reset once. It didn't stop. It couldn't stop. The 7-minute groove I'd carved into time was now the only motion time could make. The membrane had locked. It couldn't return to rest, so it fell into the rut I'd beaten into it. 7 minutes back, again and again, and the light vanished. The sun was the right size. The morning was warm. Mrs. Cabrera wasn't outside yet. The coffee cup was half full. Microwave clock, 8:14. I stood there, breathing hard, and the lemniscate started counting up again, racing toward the end of the world like it was being pulled. 7 minutes later, the sky went white. The sun swelled. It trembled. It reached that unnamed color. The light hit. Everything ended. And then it was 8:14 again. I've stopped counting how many loops I've lived through. I counted at first, hundreds. It felt like years, though. Years means nothing when the same 7 minutes plays over and over. I wrote the number down like it mattered, like it was a way to keep part of myself intact. Eventually, the counting became meaningless, and I stopped. Now I mostly stand at the window. I watch the sun the way you watch a storm coming over open water when there is nowhere to run. I watch with the attention of someone who has given up on hoping for anything but still cannot look away from what they've caused. In the quiet moments, I think about Dr. Voss's paper. I remember a line near the end that I used to read as a theory, an academic warning. Now it feels like a description of something she either saw herself or came close enough to understand that it left her. She wrote something like, "When fixation occurs, the instrument does not stop functioning. It cannot stop. It does what it was designed to do at the frequency it has been forced into, as long as the substrate endures." That's the horror. It holds, like an insect trapped in amber, not fully alive, not allowed to finish dying, pinned in the medium of its own catastrophe. I write this now because I don't know what else to do. I clicked post. I have clicked post hundreds of times. Maybe this time will be different. Maybe this one will slip through. Maybe it will reach outside the loop. Maybe it will land in a past where the button hasn't been pressed yet. You learn to type quickly when you write the same confession again and again. The brightness is changing outside now. Not clouds, not weather. That wrong, too bright quality. The sun has started to shimmer at the edges. The sky is going white. The light is coming. The light is always coming. It takes everything, perfect and indifferent. The end of every human story reduced to one blinding moment. And then it is 8:14 again. And the coffee cup is half full, and I stand at the window, and I wait. In April 2028, I will be living at 450 West Williamsburg Lane, Toledo, Ohio. Please, if anyone can read this before I do it, stop me, before it's too late.